I have a theory around that about why education, changing schools is so hard and changing school systems. And this is just a theory. I have no evidence. I haven't tested. I think there's two reasons that I see. One is the fear that parents have for their children, right? Like, I want my children to succeed, and we live in a very competitive society, and so there's obvious fear of like, am I going to make an experiment of my child, that's gonna hurt them, right? And so, our children are just what is most precious to us, and so to make an experiment on them feels scary, right? And so that's what you hear, a lot when you talk to alternative schools. Like, they tell us, like, oh, parents are so scared. They want alternatives, but then they get scared of it. And typically what you have is like, oh, in the younger years, kindergarten and the first few years of school, you can do some Montessori, but then later on it gets serious, right? Like, we get towards potentially university, and, like, now we need to get serious, right? So fear is one factor. And that's well identified. There's another factor that I believe in strongly, and I haven't read anybody else talk about this, but I feel it's important. And I think it's a Stockholm syndrome of us parents, which is that so many of us have suffered in the school system, have deeply suffered, right? All those who were misfits for the school system, obviously, right? Or kids who were bullied, but even kids like me who, I was really good in school, so I sort of sailed through school. So you could say, like, school worked for me. On some level it did. On another level, it completely killed my creativity, right? It completely killed my sense of, like, I had no idea of who I was at the age of 18. I had no idea what I was interested in. I was just, so in that way, people would have looked at me and said, like, hey, Fred, school worked for him. But in some ways I was deeply hurt by it in, ways that I can only now start to name. And when we're asking parents or teachers to imagine a radically different system, and when we show them systems that work, when we show them Montessori schools, when we show them Sudbury Valley schools that have track records of 20, 30 years that are amazing, where children just blossom, we can show it to them, right? And I think one of the main reasons they reject it is because it's too painful for them to go like, hey, if that is true, are you saying that I should not have suffered? You're just asking me to say that I needlessly suffered for 12 years in the school system. And for so many parents, I think that is almost, they go like, no, there must be something that was valuable in that for me, because otherwise you can't just say that I could have had this and that I suffered instead. And so my sense is that anybody who wants to work in this field needs to really create spaces for parents to grieve their own experience of school. And only once they've grieved that and gone through it, will they be in a space where they go like, okay, now I'm in a space where I'm willing to look at my own children and their future. And for teachers, it's even, it's grieving their own school system, and most of them think like, it worked for me. Like, I loved it so much I became a teacher, but still grieving what, But then it's even harder. It's like grieving what I did to the children in those years where I was a traditional teacher, which is really hard to do, right? Like, we were joking, Lisa, about like manager, anonymous, right? Like, if I used to be a manager, right? Like, but like teacher anonymous, would be really hard. So I think the only way we can crack this is really by creating spaces, a little bit like I've created them for the week with climate, but to really create spaces where parents go through their own history of schooling and teachers go through their own history, and we grieve that, and then we can move on.